She crushed my steel gates with a damn excavator right in front of the cops, claiming my land wasn't mine. But that was her final mistake. What started as a road dispute turned into a full-blown war, and by the end, even the feds got involved. You won't believe how far she fell. I've always believed that peace is something you make with your own hands. On my land, that peace came with sweat, calluses, and the patient grind of a man who knows the rhythm of the seasons better than the sound of traffic. 10 hectares of pasture, one small but sturdy ranch house, and a dirt road that slices through the middle like a dusty scar. That was my kingdom. That road belonged to me, and for a long time everybody respected that. The road, unpaved and lined with cedar posts, connected the county highway to the entrance of the South Ridge subdivision. A cozy little HOA cluster full of clean yards, identical mailboxes, and residents who looked like they'd get hives from stepping in mud. When I bought this land a decade ago, I figured the road might get some use, but I never charged anyone to use it. Call it country courtesy. Most of them were decent enough. They waved as they passed, slowed down near the cattle crossing, never left a mess. That changed when the HOA crowned themselves a new queen. Karen Westfield, mid-50s Botox stiff smile and a voice like a malfunctioning smoke alarm. She took over as president of the HOA last spring, and somehow in her mind that made her sheriff, mayor, and God all rolled into one. At first it was little things. A few more cars each day, kicking up more dust than usual. Then I started noticing trash, candy wrappers, energy drink cans. Once I even found an entire baby stroller frame, rusting in the ditch like some modern art monument to idiocy. Still, I kept my mouth shut. You don't start wars over litter. But then came the tire tracks. I was out feeding the cows one morning when I saw them. Deep ruts cutting into the alfalfa field, a solid 5 meters from where the dirt road ended. And not just one set, multiple. Different tread patterns, some fresh, some older. Whoever had done it wasn't just using the road. They were driving through my fields. Later that day, I drove up to the South Ridge entrance and walked into their HOA office, which was basically a glorified shed with a Keurig. Karen was inside, sipping coffee from a mug that said, "Like a boss." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I explained the situation calmly. Told her I'd noticed vehicles leaving the road and damaging my fields. That I wasn't accusing anyone yet, but I needed folks to respect the boundary lines or I'd have to restrict access altogether. Karen didn't even look up from her laptop. "They're just kids blowing off steam," she said, flipping through a spreadsheet like my livelihood was a spreadsheet. "Probably teens on dirt bikes, nothing serious." I leaned forward. "I've got livestock out there, fencing, equipment. That road's not a right-of-way, it's mine. And if I see more damage, I will close it." That got her attention. She closed the laptop and gave me a condescending little smile. The kind people reserve for someone they think just wandered in from a barn. "You can't do that. It's been used by the neighborhood for years. That's practically public access." I folded my arms. "Well, the county recorder disagrees with you. So unless y'all want to start paying road tax, I suggest you talk to your residents." She chuckled, like I'd just told her cows could fly. "Mike, this road's practically part of the community. You'd have a riot on your hands if you tried something like that." I shrugged. "Then I guess I'll start ordering riot gear." I walked out before I said something that'd land me in a lawsuit. But as I crossed back to my truck, I had that feeling in my gut. The kind you get when the wind changes before a storm rolls in. Things stayed quiet for a couple of days, no new damage, no more trash. I started thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd actually done something. And then came the footprints. I found the footprints early the next morning. Deep, messy outlines pressed into damp soil a few meters off the road. Teen-sized shoes, judging by the size. The tread pattern looked like some kind of chunky skate shoe, zigzags and squares. Multiple sets. And right beside them, more tire impressions slicing into my field like open wounds. Whoever did it wasn't just driving through, they were getting out, walking around, treating my land like it was some off-road playground. I stood there for a while, staring at the mess, hands on my hips. Anger simmered low and steady in my chest like a pot on the burner that hadn't boiled over. Yet. The following days only got worse. More trash, more tracks. A gate hinge that had been perfectly fine the night before suddenly twisted, hanging crooked like it had been yanked by a truck. I patched it up and tried to convince myself that maybe this would be the end of it. Then 2 mornings later, I walked out to check the cattle and an emptiness hit me like a punch. I whistled, expecting the herd to wander up the hill like usual, but a handful were missing. I counted again, slower this time. Still short. 3 calves. Gone. I scoured the property, checking every corner of fencing, hoping they'd just slipped off somewhere. Nothing. My chest tightened with that cold, hollow fear only folks who work with animals understand. The fear that something is hurt and you don't know where or how bad. After hours of searching, I found them. Down by the riverbank near the bend where the dirt road curves out of view lay 3 small bodies. Lifeless, caked in mud and tangled weeds. The tire tracks around them were unmistakable. Thick, aggressive treads, the kind you see on lifted trucks. The tracks cut through the soft ground, swerving like whoever had been behind the wheel was either drunk, stupid, or both. Right next to them were footprints, the same pattern I'd seen days ago, and the mud still looked fresh. I dropped to my knees beside the smallest calf and laid a hand on its side. The hide was still warm. Someone had done this recently. Rage hit me hard enough to make my vision blur. I called the sheriff. Deputy Morales showed up within the hour, clipboard in hand, moving slow and methodical as he surveyed the scene. "You got cameras out here?" he asked. "Not this far down," I answered. "Didn't think I'd need them." He crouched, studying the tire tracks. "Looks like a pickup. Bigger tires, maybe off-road modifications." He straightened, scribbling notes. "This wasn't an accident. Look at the angle, they accelerated." I swallowed, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "Can we run prints? Cast the tracks?" He sighed, and that sigh told me everything. "We can document, we can photograph. But without someone we can tie this to, the county prosecutor's gonna say it's insufficient evidence." Insufficient evidence. 3 dead calves, chunks of my property torn up. And the person who did it might get away with a shrug and a boys will be boys. I drove home in silence, chest burning with anger that felt too big to be contained. That night I couldn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my laptop screen, typing and erasing a message on Facebook over and over. Finally, I hit post. "Someone killed my livestock today. On my land. If you have any information, come forward." I included photos, I included the tracks. Within a few hours, the post exploded. Comments, shares, messages from strangers offering sympathy, outrage, prayers. Then came the one message that mattered. From a private profile, no name, just, "I know who did it. I don't want trouble, but I saw 2 guys, both in their teens. They were driving a lifted silver truck. After they hit the animals, someone in a white SUV showed up. A woman. She helped them leave. My blood ran cold. 2 teens, a lifted truck, and a woman in a white SUV. There was only one person in South Ridge who drove a pearl-white Lexus SUV and carried herself like she owned every inch of the county. Karen. I messaged back immediately. "Did you get a plate? Any names?" The reply came a minute later. I didn't get the plate, but the boys called her Mom. I sat back, staring at the screen, jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. It wasn't just neglect or disrespect anymore, this was violence. And that afternoon, standing in the hardware store, staring at the steel gate display, I made the decision. If they wanted access to my land so badly, they were going to have to go through metal. I ordered steel, the kind that could stop a truck, cameras too, motion sensors, a keypad entry system. And as the total climbed higher, I didn't flinch. Peace had a price, and I was done paying it with silence. The steel gates arrived on a Thursday, delivered on a flatbed truck that looked like it had wandered off from a military base. Matte black, reinforced, heavy as sin. The kind of gates that sent a clear message. Go around because you're not coming through here. Watching the crew unload them felt like salvation. I'd chosen a sliding model with vertical steel bars, a built-in keypad, and a lock rated to withstand a vehicle impact. The salesman had bragged that the system could stop a small tank. Whether that was true or not, the important part was that it would stop Karen. While the workers measured the posts and marked the concrete pad layout, I walked the perimeter, installing new motion sensors along the fence line. I set up cameras too, high-resolution ones, the kind ranchers buy only after life kicks them hard enough to make paranoia feel like a reasonable investment. Cords, brackets, zip ties. By the time I finished, it all looked like a low-budget prison complex. I didn't care. By late afternoon, the gates were mounted and ready. The keypad blinked patiently, waiting for me to program the access codes. I added one main code for deliveries, another for emergency services. I purposely left out the HOA. The moment I closed the gates for the first time, the motors humming like a steel jaw locking shut, I felt something inside me shift. Not relief, not victory. More like, try me now. The universe heard me loud and clear because it took less than an hour. A white Lexus SUV barreled down my road, dust clouds billowing behind it like smoke signals of entitlement. I didn't need to see the driver to know who it was. Only one person in South Ridge drove like the road beneath her was paved with her last name. Karen. She skidded to a dramatic stop right in front of the gate, window down, sunglasses on. That tight, pinched smile that said she'd never been told no in her life. What the hell is this? I leaned against the gate post and took a slow sip of iced tea purely for dramatic effect. It's a gate, I said. Most folks put them at the beginning of their private roads. This road isn't private, she snapped. We've been using it for years. And I've been letting you. Big difference. She shoved a folder through the SUV window, papers, highlighted sections, printouts from God knows where. This document shows the road is part of our community access easement. I opened the folder, flipped through it. The formatting was sloppy, margins uneven, some pages photocopied crooked. One section was dated 2 years before I even bought the land, and the county seal wasn't where it should have been. The signatures looked like they were traced by someone with caffeine tremors. I closed it. These are fake. Her face twitched, just for a second, like a glitch in a program. They are official. The HOA board signed off. Karen, I said calmly, you can't just print legal documents on your home printer and call it law. She leaned farther out the window, voice rising. You are obstructing access to our neighborhood. People need this road. Parents drive this route to take their children to school. If you don't take these gates down, I will file a formal complaint with the county. I smiled. Karen, I already called the county. They laughed. Her sunglasses slipped down her nose as she stared at me, furious. You don't understand who you're dealing with. No, I said. I understand exactly who I'm dealing with. Someone who thinks the rules don't apply to her as long as she shouts loud enough. Her jaw snapped shut. She stomped on the gas so hard her tires spun in the gravel, spraying rocks against my new steel gate. Then she slammed the folder against her passenger seat and sped away, dust swallowing her Lexus whole. I could have left it there, but I knew better. The storm hadn't passed. It just went home to reload. The next morning, before the sun burned off the fog, I was awakened by motion alerts on my security feed. I grabbed my phone, bleary-eyed, and checked the live camera footage. There she was, Karen, standing outside the gate again. Only this time she wasn't alone. A flatbed trailer sat behind her, and on that trailer was a piece of machinery that made my blood run cold. A compact excavator, engine idling, the kind that could knock down a steel gate like it was a cardboard sign. Karen pointed toward my property, barking orders to two men wearing reflective vests. They looked confused, hesitant. The excavator's bucket lifted, shifting toward the gate. My heart slammed into my ribs. I didn't bother putting on shoes. I ran. My boots hit the gravel hard as I sprinted toward the gate, heart hammering like I'd swallowed a jackhammer. The morning air was still thick with fog, but I could see the outline of that excavator clearly now. Its arm raised like a club ready to swing. "Hey!" I roared. One of the workers turned, startled. The guy looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Karen didn't even flinch. She was standing right in front of my steel gate, hands on her hips, hair perfectly sprayed into submission, as if this were just another HOA meeting where she'd decided to rearrange someone else's flower beds. "You're trespassing," I shouted as I got closer. "Cut the engine, now!" The excavator idled, coughing diesel fumes. One of the workers looked at Karen. She nodded, and the damn thing lurched forward. Metal screamed. The bucket slammed into the right side of the gate, denting it but not breaking through. Sparks flew. One of the keypad housings cracked, the panel flashing red like a wounded animal. I grabbed my phone and started filming. Karen marched over to me, not a single trace of doubt on her face, just cold, unshakable entitlement. "You've left me no choice," she snapped. "You refuse to open this gate. You're blocking public access. I am restoring it." "Karen," I said, breathless, trying not to lunge at her. "That's felony vandalism." She smirked. "It's called community service." Behind her, the excavator reversed for another hit. I didn't even hesitate. I pulled up my sheriff's speed dial and hit call. "Sheriff's office, what's your emergency?" "This is Dan Morton out at Ridge Road. Karen Westfield is on my property with a backhoe and two hired men. They're tearing down my gate. I have her on video. We're dispatching a unit now. ETA, 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes stretched like taffy. The excavator hit the gate a second time, harder. One side crumpled slightly. The motor wailed as it tried to push through steel that didn't want to move. "You're going to jail for this," I said, still filming. "And I hope your HOA covers legal fees because you're gonna need a miracle." Karen turned slowly, folding her arms. "You think people care about your little farm? About your cows? You're a nuisance, Dan. A stubborn, bitter man with too much land and not enough sense. No one's going to defend you when this goes to court." And then, like a bad sitcom punchline, sirens cut through the fog. 2 patrol cars came in hot, tires skidding across the gravel. The workers froze. The excavator stalled and hissed to a stop. Karen didn't move. Sheriff Morales stepped out first. He looked from Karen to the dented gate, then back at me, eyebrows raised. "Morning," he said. "Looks like we're doing this again." "She brought a goddamn excavator to my property," I said, pointing. "She hit the gate, twice. It's all on video." Morales turned to Karen. "Ma'am, do you have any documentation granting you access to this property?" Karen didn't miss a beat. She grabbed her trusty folder from the front seat of her SUV and handed it to him with theatrical flourish. "These documents confirm that the road is under shared access as part of the community infrastructure." Morales flipped through the pages, then handed them to Deputy Clark, who frowned immediately. "Sheriff," he said, "these seals aren't real. The formatting's wrong, and these signatures don't match the county records." Karen went pale for the first time since I'd met her. "I printed those from the HOA database," she said quickly. "We maintain our own versions." "Ma'am," Morales said firmly, "you knowingly presented falsified documentation to law enforcement and used heavy machinery to destroy private property." "You have no proof I knew they were fake," she snapped, voice rising. "I've got video of you directing the attack," I added. "You literally said, 'I'm restoring public access.' On camera. Want to hear the audio?" Karen didn't answer. Morales stepped aside and gestured toward the patrol car. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for felony vandalism, criminal trespass, and attempted fraud. You have the right to remain silent." I've seen a lot in my years, but watching Karen get cuffed, arms behind her back, expression frozen somewhere between fury and disbelief, was something I'll never forget. As they put her in the back of the cruiser, she turned and screamed through the window, "This isn't over. You don't get to win. I'll see you in court." The engine rumbled to life and the cruiser rolled away, taillights fading into the mist. I stood there, breath caught somewhere between a laugh and a snort. One of the workers approached me slowly. "We didn't know it was illegal," he mumbled. "She told us she had permits." I nodded. "Not your fault. Get off my land." They left quietly, dragging the excavator behind them. Later that evening, I reviewed the footage. Everything was there, clear shots of Karen directing the machine, the gate damage, the exchange with the sheriff. It was airtight. But I knew better than to think this was the end. Karen was the kind of person who didn't go down without dragging someone else through hell first. And she had just declared war in the most public way possible. Karen made bail by nightfall. Of course she did. Someone like her doesn't sit long behind bars. Too connected, too entitled, too busy writing checks with other people's reputations. The next morning, the HOA issued a bland public statement that danced around the truth like it was radioactive. They regretted the misunderstanding, acknowledged the stress caused by recent events, and claimed Karen had acted independently of the HOA's formal directives. In other words, we don't know her. The problem was the paperwork Karen had waved around during her gate-crushing performance carried the HOA's letterhead. Real or fake, someone had helped her fabricate that mess. And the more we looked, the more rot we found under the surface. My lawyer, Mario Grace, was a civil litigation bulldog in cowboy boots. I handed him the footage, the photos, the messages from the anonymous witness who saw Karen's sons at the scene of the dead calves, and the so-called easement documents. He studied them for an hour in silence, then finally said, "Yeah, let's skin this cat." We filed charges the same day: criminal trespass, destruction of property, attempted fraud, and harassment. But more than that, we filed a civil suit for damages, cost of the gate, land restoration, livestock loss, emotional distress, legal fees. The lawsuit rattled the HOA. They tried to distance themselves even further, but Mario subpoenaed their internal emails. And wouldn't you know it, buried in one chain just a few days before the incident was a note from Karen to the board titled, "Reclaiming Road Access. Strategy." In it, she asked for discretionary backing to enforce neighborhood interests. The kicker? 3 board members replied with some variation of "do what you have to do." So we named them too. Word of the case spread fast. Local papers started using phrases like "Gate" and the South Ridge Siege. Reporters reached out. Neighbors started whispering in grocery stores. Suddenly, the crazy rancher wasn't so crazy after all. And that's when I got the message. It came in a plain envelope left in my mailbox, no return address. Inside was a single-page letter, handwritten in clean block letters. I used to live in South Ridge. 3 years ago, Karen fined me $1,200 for flying an unapproved American flag. My property wasn't even under HOA jurisdiction. I didn't fight back because I was scared, but I kept the paperwork. I'm willing to testify. His name was Robert Calloway, Vietnam vet, lived one street over from South Ridge's official border. Mario nearly kissed me when I showed him the letter. We contacted Robert and brought him in as a witness. The man showed up in pressed slacks, a bronze star pin on his lapel and a fire in his eyes that hadn't dulled with age. "I may be old," he told us, "but I'm not blind. That woman used fear like fertilizer, spread it around to grow her own power. Time someone dug up the roots." During the preliminary hearings, Robert gave his statement. Calm, clear, devastating. He described how Karen had intimidated him, sent threatening letters, even told him his grandchildren were lowering the neighborhood profile. He'd paid the fine just to make her go away. The courtroom was silent when he finished. Even the judge leaned back, eyebrows raised. Karen sat stiffly at the defense table, her lawyer whispering frantically in her ear. That guy, some overgroomed poodle in a three-piece suit named Ellis Barron, had swaggered in on day one like this was a traffic ticket. But now, he looked like a man watching the lifeboats get lowered. And then came the moment I didn't see coming. Mario presented a forensic analysis of the easement documents Karen had submitted to the county land office. The seals were fake, the signatures digitally altered, and worst of all, the date stamps didn't match any known filings. A key stamp supposedly from the zoning office was traced back to a public online PDF toolkit used for mock government forms. When Mario finished laying it out, Judge Holloway looked at Karen's lawyer and asked flatly, "Did your client submit these documents knowingly?" Ellis froze. You could almost hear his soul trying to climb out of his body. I need a moment," he stammered, "to consult with my client." They huddled for all of 15 seconds. Then Ellis stood up, looking a whole lot paler than when the day started. "Your Honor, I'm withdrawing as counsel." Holloway blinked. "Excuse me? I've just been made aware that my client may have misrepresented the authenticity of critical documents submitted to this court and to public records offices. That places me in professional jeopardy." And just like that, Karen's lawyer bailed mid-hearing. She stood there, mouth half open, face draining of color. No backup, no shield. Just a woman in a pantsuit caught in her own collapsing illusion. The judge adjourned for lunch and ordered Karen to return with new counsel by the afternoon. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, sipping vending machine coffee, heart still pounding. I'd come in expecting resistance, fireworks, dirty tricks. What I hadn't expected was Karen's entire foundation crumbling from one tap. The excavator, the dead calves, the gate, that was just the surface. But now we were digging deeper. And what we were uncovering? That was going to bury her. By the time Karen came back from the lunch recess with a new lawyer, some court-appointed baby-faced associate barely old enough to rent a car, the damage was already done. She looked thinner somehow, less composed. Her usual airs of suburban royalty had been stripped down to a stiff blouse and clenched teeth. The judge asked her counsel if he needed time to review the case. He did. Holloway gave him 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes were brutal. Reporters were already circling like vultures. One of them managed to snap a photo of Karen walking into the building looking like a melting wax statue. It went viral before the next recess ended. Headline read, "From HOA Queen to Defendant, Karen Westfield's Fall from Grace." But we weren't done yet. Mario stepped up like a man on a mission. He didn't raise his voice, didn't grandstand, just laid out fact after fact like he was nailing down coffin lids. We brought in the forensic tech who'd analyzed the fake documents. She explained how the metadata in Karen's files showed edits made from her personal IP address, time-stamped just 3 days before the destruction of the gate. Next came the county land office rep, who testified that no shared easement had ever existed, and that Karen's submission was the only one ever flagged for suspicious irregularities in their database. The judge asked Karen's new lawyer if he disputed the findings. The poor kid just shook his head. Then came the final punch. Mario called the anonymous witness who'd messaged me after the calves were killed. He wasn't anonymous anymore. Turned out he was a part-time mechanic who lived near the river bend, the place where I'd found the bodies. He took the stand, nervous but solid. He told the court what he saw. 2 teenage boys in a lifted silver truck tearing across my field. How they sped recklessly, laughing until something went wrong. How they got out, walked around nervously. How Karen showed up 10 minutes later in a white Lexus. How she popped her trunk, pulled out a jerry can, and helped get their truck running again. Mario paused. Did she say anything to them? Yes, sir, the witness said. She said no one saw anything. You're going home, understand? Karen's jaw tightened. Do you recognize those boys? The witness nodded. Her sons. I've seen them at HOA events. They handed out flyers once. I looked over at Karen. Her hands were in her lap, knuckles white, fingers locked like she was holding on to her sanity with both fists. Mario rested our case. Then, just for good measure, the state prosecutor chimed in. Apparently, the forged documents Karen submitted weren't just civil infractions. They had triggered a flag with the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. The fake county seals, false zoning approvals, and attempt to influence public records put her squarely in violation of Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. the 1001st paragraph. Knowingly falsifying or concealing a material fact in any matter within the jurisdiction of the United States government. Judge Holloway leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Are you saying this case falls under federal jurisdiction now? The prosecutor nodded. We're submitting the report to the U.S. Attorney's Office for review. Karen's new lawyer sank visibly in his chair. Holloway didn't miss a beat. Very well. We'll proceed with today's ruling and allow federal jurisdiction to assess further criminal charges. I don't know what Karen thought was going to happen, but I'm willing to bet she didn't picture herself being slapped with both civil and federal liability in the same week. The judge read out the final decision. Karen Westfield was found guilty of willful destruction of private property, trespassing, submission of falsified legal documents, obstruction of a law enforcement investigation. She was sentenced to 9 months of supervised probation, 300 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay $48,000 more in restitution, 24 for the destroyed gate and sensors, 10 for property damage, and the rest for legal expenses. Her sons were not charged with felonies, they were minors at the time, but were sentenced to labernil, 100 hours of court-ordered community service, and mandatory driving school plus fines. The HOA board members who had supported Karen quietly resigned before the next election, and the court issued a final injunction. Karen Westfield was permanently banned from holding any leadership position in a registered neighborhood organization anywhere in the state. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sat there, blinking slowly, as if her brain had finally run out of ways to rationalize what was happening. After the ruling, she stood up stiffly, nodded once at the judge, and walked out without a word. Mario turned to me, his voice low and dry. Well, that was surgical. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Reporters waved microphones. I gave one short statement. I'm just a man who wanted people to respect my land, that's all. And that was it. No victory laps, no banners, just the quiet satisfaction of truth holding its ground. But what happened next? That was entirely up to me. It's been 6 months since the verdict. The gate still stands. A little scratched, a little dented from the day Karen tried to bulldoze it into history. But still locked, still strong. I keep it oiled, changed the code, installed floodlights too. Not because I'm scared anymore, but because some scars deserve a little illumination. The fields are healing. The ruts from the truck tires have been leveled, reseeded. The grass is growing in thick again. A neighbor's daughter painted a wooden sign that hangs near the gate now. It says, "Private road. Respect it or keep driving." She asked me if I wanted something more formal. I told her it was perfect. The most surprising part? The change in the community. After the dust settled, people started coming around more. Folks I hadn't spoken to in years, some from South Ridge, some from farther out, showed up with pies, fence posts, apologies. One guy even brought me a baby goat, said it was insurance against bad energy. The new HOA board reached out a month after Karen's ban. They asked, formally, respectfully, if I'd consider reopening access through my road for emergency services and residents under a written agreement with liability clauses and monthly compensation. I said yes, not because I had to, because I chose to. The gate still stays locked most of the time, but now there's a key in the fire department's lockbox. The agreement is clear. Respect the land, pay the agreed-upon fee, no abuse, no assumptions. So far, not a single issue. Karen moved away 2 months after the ruling. Sold her house quietly, no goodbye parties, no HOA newsletters. I heard she's living somewhere out west, maybe Arizona. Somewhere with fewer gates and fewer people who remember. The calves were buried under the sycamore tree near the bend in the river. I planted wildflowers there. It's peaceful now. Still, sometimes I walk down in the mornings with a thermos of coffee and sit in the tall grass just to listen. I've learned a few things through all this. Power doesn't always come with titles. Respect isn't given, it's earned, and it can be lost faster than it takes to swing a gate shut. And sometimes, to protect your peace, you've got to build something strong enough to stop the noise and be ready to defend it. One last thing. A few weeks ago, I hosted a small barbecue. Nothing fancy. Some ribs, cold beer, lawn chairs. People came, not out of guilt or pity, but because they wanted to. Robert Calloway showed up in a clean white shirt and brought a pecan pie his late wife used to bake. Mario came too and told stories about a judge who used to knit during court. At one point, I saw one of Karen's former board members, Janice, standing near the gate staring at it. She turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about taking it down?" I smiled. "Nope." And then I handed her a plate of ribs.